Hey everyone, Almost Perfect Gamer here. It's been a while since I made some videos, but this video I feel like is important. Just going to touch a little bit on the way things are going today with our officers, citizens, community things. I've had the privilege to be included in a special circle, a group of people that are kind, caring, they care about the community, officers included. This is going to be one of my main points. Not all officers are bad. They get a bad name from the ones that, let's say, don't follow the rules or that are corrupt, straight to the point. But what we're talking about is kind of bridging things and bringing the community and the officers together. And so, we had a meeting today, and I'll play the video after this. I won't talk too much. More or less, we're kind of trying to bridge that gap between each other, and show not only our community, but hopefully this catches on and goes to your community, and maybe many other communities that see, hey, these guys can do it. We can follow and do the same thing. Not be afraid to talk to the officers, the ones that you can actually go and talk to. There are some out there, you just gotta go down to your city police station or government council, and there's like I said, a group of people that got this started, and great group of people. You'll see them in the video to follow. So yeah, let's just get right into the video. Thanks. Almost Perfect Gamer. Hit like, subscribe. Please share this video because it's needed all around the world to show that people and police, law enforcement can get along depending on how you go about things. It's give and take on both sides. So, all right. Everyone stay safe. Love all of y'all. God bless.
Okay.
So our question is, what do you think about our city?
About our city?
Yeah.
I think it's great.
That's good. That's one good year.
I give a 5-minute answer.
It's a good place to raise your kids. There's work to be done in some areas, but I appreciate my representatives. I feel like they're accessible, and it's nice that the police are making themselves accessible as well. I feel like you can talk and know people. It's important.
That's good. Selika, do you want to say something? What do you think about the city? I just want to Come on, guys.
It's kind of a rite of passage for the circle.
Oh, is that what it goes?
Yeah.
I'm Selika, president. Well, for one more week, then I become vice president, and Pearl becomes president. And I'm on Eau Claire Police and Fire. General troublemaker. I run Juneteenth. Okay, hi. Professor Ann. There's a bunch of ands in there, but we don't want to go into that power of it. And I work with them.
That's good. That's good.
And I did a lot of the logistics last year for the protests, working with the chief and working with deputy chief. So
I was just thinking about that, the different protests that we had, the different marches. It just had such a different feel in Eau Claire than it did in the Twin Cities for Madison, Milwaukee. That it was kind of we want to make this better, not let's rip stuff down and burn it down kind of thing. And I don't know, maybe it's our Midwest nice was really showing. I'm not sure, but I think it was more of a proactive demonstration versus, and there was some reactive, obviously, because otherwise we wouldn't have been doing it with what had happened. But it was more of just saying, like, we expect better out of our world, and we're going to do better in this community.
well, a lot of the older activists here are used to trying to talk to the police. And I think that started with Jerry Madison. when he was the police chief. I know he approached the university at that point, and he was working with Chief Sprigg. And now at the university, we have Chief Robles, and he works with Chief Dobson. But I think the difference really is we have a set of activists here who are willing to work with the police and who are willing to talk to the police. And we have a police force that is willing to work with those activists. There's very much more, and I say this because I'm also on the state board of the ACLU, so I know a little too much about what goes on in Madison and Milwaukee. Very much an adversarial relationship there between police and activists, and sometimes activists and activists. Whereas here, you know, really since about 2008, we've been trying to develop a relationship between police and community so that police officers know who it is who's coming in to be predators on the Black community as opposed to seeing the entire multicultural community as one big set of criminals. To be able to tell us apart, I think, is so important. And to treat. I keep telling the story of how my mom said that this was the first place that a police officer ever called her ma'am and treated her with respect. And the same with my younger brother when he's here. The same with my husband, and my husband's from South Central. And one of his best friends is the detective in charge of 77th Precinct right now. But he said it was really, for him, that made all the difference. Not being treated as a suspect, not being treated disrespectfully, not being abused right off the bat. And I think that's one of the things that Eau Claire Police does very well. You know, there's always going to be, we're always going to grow, we're going to learn some more stuff, and maybe hopefully bring it to the public. We're hoping a new social worker will work with the public to teach people in public how to help de-escalate stuff. And we're hoping we can teach the public how to behave a little better sometimes too.
I think you bring up a good point, though, Salika, is this kind of a back work almost that has to happen where people are already kind of afraid of the police in cities like St. Paul and Minneapolis and Milwaukee, and the back work of like sort of regaining that, you know, that politeness, that professional quality, rather than coming at somebody, you know, and they're afraid of you. They can see you as, you know, just a member of the community that's doing their job. And I think that's important because I think that if that fear's there, whether you cause it or not, it's still there. So there's almost like back work to do in that regard.
We have backwork on both sides, I think.
Yeah, I think the process you described, Salika, too, I mean, it caused us to kind of humanize each other a little bit as well, and so we had that trust building that was there, and so when we had, you know, the task at hand last summer with the demonstrations, we kind of already knew each other. There was a level of trust that was developed, and kind of through that several-year process too, as a department, you know, we evolved to a point where we looked at a demonstration, not something like maybe some of my peers throughout the country would look at as something that needed to be stopped or controlled or barricaded in. It's, you know, a fundamental constitutional right, and that we have the responsibility to work with others to make sure it's a safe event, and we have a role in preserving those constitutional rights to do that. And we never would have gotten to that point if we wouldn't have had that trust building or that dialogue in the background that you described to do that, so we could be at that starting point to do that. So at a minimum, if I didn't know, or Deputy Chief Thomas didn't know the organizer, I could make a phone call or send a text message and find out who those people are, and so then we can make some phone calls out, and many of them were kind of surprised to hear from us, like, oh my goodness, the police are calling me about our planned event. We got to hide and or not return the phone call, but we were able to kind of work through those barriers because of that back work. And, we're appreciative of kind of the process that we've gone through to kind of get there where we can do those things too.
I think that's really
keep it.
I think you guys do this because when you guys do this kind of interaction with the community, we pretty much we're not going to be able to go protest because we can't make our voice here. Yeah. So this is a really good thing, and I'm talking to my people, you know, like the Latino community. A lot of people say they feel more afraid to leave, like, you know, Luna, Chepua, or other towns than Eau Claire. So I think you guys done a really good job. So that's good.
I think, you know, when
That's good.
It's good for us, I guess.
when I'm in Los Angeles, if somebody is harassing me or something, I don't want to call the police because I'm afraid the police there will see me as an opportunity for a ticket. I think I've told the story publicly of my mother-in-law being in her front room in a wheelchair in 2015. And a guy came through the front window and tried to rob the house. My then 90-year-old father-in-law picked up his service revolver and scared the guy right back out the window because Korean War vet, you know, he said Arkansas, Louisiana, that's what we're like. But when they called my husband and I was on the speaker, I said, so have you called the police yet? And they laughed at me. Why would we call the police? They'll just plant something here or steal our stuff or falsely accuse us. So that's, I think, a lot of the attitude we have to work with, and that comes from some of the problems outside. The one thing that because I'm on police and fire, I know what this process is. If we have an officer who's acting up, we know that the thin blue line is not going to protect that officer, and that builds a lot more trust. You know, and that's something that I think in other places makes people a lot more afraid. Whereas here, I think some of our multicultural people are a little bit more willing to call the police because they don't think they're just going to be harassed or immediately stopped because of the skin color.
I think on the opposite side of that too is, you know, most of our officers have only worked here, and not to say, you know, there isn't room for improvement here, but kind of at least part of the process that we've undergone the last couple of years too is educating ourselves as police officers about the experiences in other communities as well. And so when you kind of describe that scenario for our officers, not to just, and including myself, and I kind of got there when I had some training opportunity 5-6 years ago with other peers from around the country, is that experience that you described as far as something being planted or dishonesty or you know, general corruption, that's a real experience. And so when we kind of hear or feel those concerns, to recognize that maybe that's not the experience locally, that is what people experience in other communities. And so knowing the place where, you know, other people are coming from is important, an important skill for us.
I know that you guys have done stuff like neighborhood association meetings and different things like that. Can you think of other ways that you guys are getting out into the community instead of, you know, answering the call, but just to build that relationship with? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, that's a good question, because there's like five layers to it. You know, it starts with who we hire. You know, and hiring the right people that have the right, you know, public service mindset, that share our values. So looking at starting with who we hire, we've got a field training program that supports that prioritizes community policing and community involvement. And then, you know, our officers being assigned to the same neighborhood for at least a year, so you're kind of connected to a neighborhood and have that connection. So we've got some structures in place. You know, we have an intentional effort to be at events, you know, to be there and be accessible when there's an absence of them, trying to, you know, work with others to create an event or an environment like this. We've got the Junior Police Academy going on that just this very week in Carson Park. So that's, you know, we've got our school resource officers with a group of 15 Eau Claire youth or regional youth, just kind of having that interaction then. So the neighborhood associations are another one. I'm sure there's a couple others that are
Transparency tab.
Transparency, the things that we've done on our website, through social media, kind of having a listing of all of our, you know, some, you know, more notable calls for service, things that we do. So we have to kind of look for technology and creative ways. So they're my message for community outreach events.
Boy, there's a
Run with the police.
I think that like a few of the I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Like some of the community things, I met quite a few officers playing ball, Some of them are out in the community when they're lifting weights, things like that. So we meet them in different ways. So I think that's a big difference too.
That's one thing I try to stress on our officers. You know, get out there, coach
Right,
kids.
right.
Larry and I, we spent time on the basketball court together, watching our kids play. I've seen them out on the soccer field. I've seen them at the gym. Cameron and my son are friends. They ride the bus together. You know, and so it's good that people see us outside of the uniform.
Right,
You know? And you know, I know Gracia does a lot with the youth, and obviously Joe is heavily involved in the community too, outside of just what we do as police service. So they see us as individuals.
Right.
You know, so they know that this is a profession. We respect it. We do the best that we can. But we're just as human as anybody else. We have kids. We have families. We invest in the community. We eat here. We dine here. We spend time downtown. My parents have just been here recently. Like, they couldn't believe how much development has happened down here. How beautiful Claire looks. So I wasn't born and raised here, but I'm sure glad I came here back in 2004. Seen a big change since 2004. A lot of development, a lot of great ideas, and a lot of progressiveness from our council and everybody else putting money put forward, and it helps us. And the chief talked about our hiring practices. I don't think a lot of people realize that roughly 40% of the people that we do backgrounds on get hired. The other 60% don't even pass our background process, and the chief is more than willing to keep empty spots in squad cars rather than hiring the wrong person. We'll wait until we get the right person. We have the patience for it. And we have the right leadership in place. The chief promotes the right sergeants, you know, the first line supervisors are watching over our officers to make sure that they're doing the right thing and making the right decisions. And, you know, it's a hard, heavy burden on him because he doesn't have a crystal ball, but, you know, he'll side with caution. You see him do it, side with caution, and let people go with him rather than bring them out of the department and taking a risk. We won't not do that. So it starts with our hiring process. It's well known. It's not easy to say, but a lot of people don't apply to it because of other people. It's just because they're afraid to come through, but we're not changing.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Something with that, what he was saying, because me and Mel have been working with guys with different ways that they were police officers and established job what they did. But we also, for our community, from here, this is the first place down there besides my hometown, which is now a wreck in Memphis. They need help. This has been the first town that I've seen that actually the community leaders are involved in the community themselves, policing each other, rather than, you know what I'm saying, just leaving it to the professionals, which is you guys, the police department, to do your job. Working with you guys also as community leaders and keeping everything under wraps is also a unique thing that you don't necessarily see in major cities. Because most of the major cities, the reason why there's so many people scared of major cities is because they don't interact, one, like this, and two, the community leaders are scared to even talk to the community itself because they're worried about what, you know what I'm saying, why the police are not doing this or doing that. But it starts with us in the community as well. We have to also make that step with community leaders like Larry, now right here, what's your name, sir? I'm sorry. And your name, ma'am? I'm sorry.
I'm Dr. Lawson.
Dr. Larkin. Hey, sorry if I didn't get y'all here the first time. But it starts with them first, being community leaders, you know, policing us up, also talking to people around, getting us into the right mindset and the right frame of mind, so that when things are necessary a little bit overhead, and when you guys step in, things are much more rectified, they're much more calmer, and much easier to deal with. This is the first place that I lived in a long time that I can honestly say I want my kids here so that they can enjoy what life should really be, because they actually get the chance to go outside and play, and I don't have to worry about, oh, you know what I'm saying, duck, because, you know, bullet coming this way, or about to get hit in the road, because it's literally that type of feel, that type of atmosphere. And then not only should y'all also be proud and we should be commended for it, but also the community leaders like Larry, Ms. Harden, Mr. Nate. Thank you guys so much as well. Oh, and I can't forget y'all as well. One incredible blast for me. This is gonna be my first year, and I'm hoping that it's gonna be even better. And hopefully I'll be, you know, in a uniform sometime in the near future as well, working with you guys. So we'll see.
United Bridges really, I mean, the reason why we incorporated that name is we wanted to bridge the racial differences. And I know Burl is a former city councilor. He was the first black person on city council. Now we've got Roderick Jones, who is our new black city councilman on our board. It's no good to have community leaders if they're not in the community. It's no good to have community leaders if they're corrupt, and in some other places they are corrupt. We are ordinary people. You know, my husband's here, a bunch of people know him as a Boy Scout leader. Dr. Gannon, well, Ned Gannon knows him. Professor Gannon knows him. You know, but my husband's also with the theater club. So he's out here and he's in the community. My son grew up here. I've been here since '93. But there's been a really deliberate thing with us to be able to uplift not just within our own groups, but across our own groups, to build the ties, but to let everybody know that there's one set of values that we want, you know, so that people won't come and undermine us. I know Deputy Chief Thomas and Chief Rokas know I had a rather interesting individual I had to deal with last summer. But I think, you know, part of that is that understanding that person had to learn, which is that there are certain things you just don't do, there are certain ways you behave. You know, and if you're not going to behave that way, we're not going to have you in the circle of love. You got to learn to have respect. You know, I think the respect thing is at the center of everything we do. So, and I see a pretty little girl with a cell phone.
Nadia. And that was my other thing is I think more people need to know how things are working here, like across the U.S., other places. Maybe, you know, nowadays people follow trends. They follow examples like that a lot faster than they used to. So by setting this example, I think if you get it out there to the public in other places, like they'll said, it would help a lot more. I've been here since '93 too. I know your husband, so I do think by getting out in the community is that's the biggest part. Like working with kids from the YMCA, there's a lot of kids out here that are not being taught, that don't feel like they can come forward. They don't feel like they have a voice. And that was kind of like, you know, I don't have a voice for them to a point, but that's what we're trying to do. So a lot of them were going to the YMCA because they felt that was their safe spot. That's where they had someone that would listen, things like that. And I've known most of them since they're before their age. So, you know, now they're a little bigger, and now I'm to the next, you know, group. But so, but to begin with, and it's gotten a lot better the last few years. So I've noticed that myself. I've had issues here when I first came here. So Larry knows about some of them. So, but it has gotten a lot better. And you know, we thank you to you guys that are changing that. And there's a few other guys that's retired now. Love those guys. You know, Todd Johnson, Mike Lennon, those guys, awesome.
Todd Johnson nearly gave me a
Will.
heart attack.
Yeah, he always does that. Oh God, he does that.
Slams that car right in front of me,
Yes.
and I'm like, what the heck's gonna happen? And then he gets out and gets the tuba out back. Because he wants the Klezmers to play at MLK, and I'm standing here looking at him like,
He's
you are
awesome.
not doing this to me in public.
And you
You are
know,
not.
he used to do when they had rookies. I would actually, because I know he was on Water Street sometime, a lot of times, you know, like back when we would go out back then, or even at a gas station, he would pull up to me, he would introduce me to the rookie. He was like, "Oh, this is Mel. Just want to introduce you to the new guy." And he's like, "Don't profile. He's not one of those guys. So don't, you know." He'd let him know, like, "No, this is not that case. Don't do that." So, and he would always do that. Like, "Oh, I just want to introduce you to the rookie or whatever," and like. There was a couple of times he was behind me, and like I pulled in gas station, he pulled right in behind me, he jumps out with that big smile, and "Hey Mel, just want to introduce you to the new guy." Yeah, he was awesome.
He and Officer Ford both had pulled my husband over to give them messages for me. And my husband is like, what? So he could tell them we do not like the light show behind us.
Yeah,
Black man from South Central, don't do this.
yeah, he's like, "What's going on?" And he gives out the car, "Hey Mel, want to introduce you to the new guy here."
It's done that quite a few times.
I know,
You know-
sorry. I know Larry has a lot of questions for you later on, but one question that always in my mind since we met last time is that you guys, do you ask your officers how they feel now for what happened in Minneapolis? How they feel when to approach to someone, you know, that they stop and they feel fear? How they feel? Because I see they go like a lot of more questions. A lot of more people tell me like they go with more fear, like they go with already with the hand on the gun right away. So how they feel? Do you know how actually?
Yeah, that's a tough question because I mean, just our department, we got 99 officers. You have 99 different just kind of viewpoints or experiences. You know, it's kind of you know, it's so I have to kind of generalize, but it's kind of gone in waves a little bit. I mean, if you look at the last year and a half, I mean, all of our officers, they saw the same video, you know, that everyone else did, and they felt the same way. That's not, you know, that's not an acceptable police practice. It was criminal. It was wrong. It was awful. And shared those similarities. There is, I wouldn't say there is more personal fear right now for safety at work. I would say the kind of the biggest concern and fear right now has more to do just the sense of safety in their career and their work environment. There's a lot of with the increased, it's hard for me to describe this, but just with the increased public scrutiny, there's just concerns that they'll kind of find themselves in a situation or an incident through no fault of their own, through no like moral or character flaw, that they'll be incorrectly judged and or you know for their actions. And so there's just a lot of concern about the scrutiny and what that means. It's not that it's felt to be completely unfair. It's just there's unknown and uncertainty with it. And so I would say the greater degree of fear has to do with those types of concerns, that if they find themselves in a you know, a use of force situation and maybe they make a mistake. People do make mistakes. There's a difference between making a random mistake and there's a difference between just being a bad person and a bad police officer. So there's fear about making an honest mistake. There's fear about being involved with something that's going to be interpreted incorrectly, and just what that means for their personal place in life, their families, how they can support their families, what that means for their employment and their source of income. So there is fear and concern there, not so much the personal safety things. I think the example you talk about as far as like, you know, just when you go to interact with somebody and having your hand on your gun and kind of that a little bit maybe more aggressive, vigilant posture. When I was hired as a new police officer in the late 90s, same thing with Derek, we were trained that way. That's, you know, basically a lot of our police training was geared towards, I mean, policing is a dangerous job. I'm not gonna shy away from that. But our training basically was that there was a threat behind every corner and in every person. And so there was kind of a socialization into a vigilant police culture that was the result of that. I can remember a police training that I was at. It was sponsored by a local education institution where I was going through a traffic stop scenario, and in training, I asked the person for their driver's license, and the role player, supposedly, part of this training scenario, had a razor blade taped to the driver's license, slit my throat, and killed me. And so that was my training scenario. And so that's kind of an extreme example.
Right.
But that's kind of how, you know, I think as a profession, we've kind of gotten to some of the places that we're at. And so I talk a lot about training and training priorities and the importance of training. Our officers need to be trained to keep themselves safe. They need to be trained to protect the community, but not everybody's a threat. And so time and training and you know, will help us with that. And so there's times where, police officers are going to have to draw his or her gun, and they're going to have to, you know, take some decisive action to protect somebody or protect themselves. But that threat isn't hiding behind every corner, because what we do is being seen by others, and that kind of that impacts the level of trust that the community members have in us and how we treat them, because there isn't a threat behind every corner in every single scenario. So we gotta kind of untrain that and have time kind of take some of that out of our profession.
That kind of paramilitary training has led us to the problems we have today. I'm from New Orleans. I'm from Orleans East.
I love how that ran together in one word.
Well, It is as it is.
Southern is
I
different.
got a
Yeah.
transit. I am from New
Orleans. Yeah. That's
And there, the police have been, instead of going towards community policing, evidence-based policing instead of training, they have gone more towards the paramilitary SWAT type.
yeah.
And now, no one will talk to them. They can't clear murders. They can't do any of that kind of stuff because thank you. Because no one will cooperate, and the DA has to jail witnesses sometimes longer than the person who is accused. So there's a reason why you see the more professionalized police and security units are moving towards evidence-based policing. Because we know that when you have that fear jacked up training in some ways, that fear response makes it a lot easier to stereotype people. If you can keep that cortisone down, if you can keep that fear in check, it's a lot easier to literally see people as they are instead of seeing them through that stereotype.
Have that control. Yeah.
But we need to teach the public that too, so that when they see a police officer, I admit, I see the lights behind me and I'm going, oh God. What I do. But you have to, to teach people how to breathe through that, to be able to work with an officer in a calm way. So what Uniting Bridges is doing is we want to work with the police to support evidence-based policing. But we want to launch in October a set of trainings for de-escalation that will be for the community. Not just for the community to work with the police, but the community to work with each other. Because if we can get people to treat each other with more respect, but also without some of the jumping to conclusions, some of the fears, some of the automatic stereotyping, then the police will have a lot less of the petty kind of crazy calls and can focus more on violent crime.
Right.
And not as much on, see, my neighbor jacked my chicken and, is over here standing on my retaining wall and is looking at me. Don't laugh, that happened in my neighborhood. Ask Paul Smith
That's a
about
pretty
that.
specific example.
It's not my chicken, I was the witness to all this crap.
I think it goes back to perception and that call that you got about Larry saying he and some of his friends were going to come and talk to you, versus, hey, Larry and a couple buddies want to come and have a conversation with you. It's that face-to-face interaction where you can tell the intent, where if it's an email, a text, comment online or something like that, it's hard to tell the intent of it. And I think that's where gatherings like this help build those bridges, help a lot of people get to know each other better. And that was also something that we've obviously missed over the last year and a half out of necessity, but hopefully we can get back to it. So.
I have one more thing. Has anybody asked any of the state patrols to attend, like want a representative from them? Because I know that's like a different breed type, and they have their own operating rules. So, but in the public eyes, they're still seen as an officer. And the way those guys do things, no offense, but it's a little different. They're a little more aggressive. They're a little more, we run the state type thing. So I wanted to bring that up because I've talked to the captain a while back, and he's had a couple on his roster. I think there's still one on there. I'm not going to say any names, but we all know, but yeah, we know who they are. But
United Bridges has been trying to work. We're working our way up to the state.
Okay.
Right now, we're beginning to move into Chippewa, and we're working with Chief Atkinson in Menominee.
Okay, yeah, I
But
know
as
who
you
that
know,
is.
my husband's had an interesting
we
interaction.
have they are pretty interesting, we'll say, but those guys, it makes everyone else look like they're in that same category because they're in a uniform, they're a cop, they're pulling them over, but they're state patrol, but they seem to feel like they're above everyone else to a certain point. So I just wanted to know if there's anybody that maybe would come and get that.
So I'll work with Jody, and if you
Okay.
guys feel free to email. The email is unitingbridges@gmail.com.
Okay.
I don't have my cards with me.
It's
But
okay.
if you look at the Uniting Bridges Facebook page
Okay.
or the Uniting Bridges website, you can email me through that. Because we would like to get a bunch of people together to
Yeah.
talk to the local state patrol office here, but also the one at Toma.
Right.
Because a lot of our
Yeah.
military who live here have to
Go to Toma. Yeah.
and that's where
Yeah.
you get the tickets for going
Yeah.
under the speed limit.
It's crazy.
Been there.
Yeah,
got the warning
all
for that
kinds of
one. And a number of other things. So we like to start trying to do
Right.
that work, but we need some people to work with us.
Right.
We're also trying to do some check-ins for our local Black community. And the next one is probably going to be first weekend in August. So if you email me, I'll put y'all on the list.
Okay.
And we can talk and y'all can help me. Well, and Burl, because Burl was taking the lead, so he's just going to step back a little.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
I have to take off, but thank you guys. Thank you so much for arranging.
Thank you,
this.
thank you.
Yeah,
We
thank
can
you.
talk more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See ya.
Much for me, what I would suggest, I know we are all a little bit, we are more responsible. I think if we work more with the youth, because that's the area we need to work a lot.
Yeah.
I think if we work more with the youth, how to, if a police pull you over, how you are supposed to want to know to talk to him or
Right.
why you pulling me over, right away. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Instead of listening first, I need your ID, you give my ID first. If we need to work on that one, I think we might solve more problems, future problems. I think if we get both of us, doctor, our Mr. Andrew, and every of us, if we can do that more, with the youth, I think,
Yeah.
we do more.
That's kind of where I was going with that too, Larry, when I was saying, they don't feel like they can come and talk to an officer. There's only a handful that does. And because, what they see in media, things like that, experiences in the past. And that's where I was going with the integrating in the community is what she was going with. So,
And if there's a problem, we can't fix it if we don't know about it.
Right.
So there's recourse on how to do that. I mean, a lot of people look at police officers as kind of all the same. We have rank structure and supervisors. So our supervisors their job is to make sure that we're providing police services in a fair way that's consistent with our policies and community expectations. And so they need to kind of hold our officers for that. If our supervisors aren't doing that, that's my responsibility and my failure for not doing that. And then we also have, a citizen or community member oversight of these functions as well. And the first step is making sure that we're aware of them, that we have the pathways of communication
Right.
to do that. And this is a step in that direction,
Right.
step in that direction and strengthening that pathway so we can do that. So there's a willingness to come forward and say, hey, this wasn't right, or I don't.
We also need to, but while W.T. Thomas and Chief Rokas are policy at the top, we need to talk to the police union gentlemen. We probably all need to do ride-alongs because setting policy and having the policy enforced are the two different things.
right, definitely.
And that I will see culturally as supportive and not see culturally as supportive.
Right.
And to let those rank and file officers know what our idea of respect
Right.
is going to be a lot. It's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Because in some ways, a lot of the black people here have ties to the South
Yeah.
or
Midwest.
are coming from international,
Right.
especially Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia.
Right. Kenya.
Kenya. And we have some very specific cultural ideas.
Right.
For instance, in the community I came from, you never speak to an adult or somebody who's an elder by their first name.
Right.
So the people who immediately start calling me my first name, I have to step back, take a breath, and say, oh yeah, that's right.
You're not, yeah. It was always sir and ma'am. And,
Sir and ma'am,
So,
you do that, sir and ma'am.
yeah, so. Okay. Oh, no.
I know. Yeah, I know.
right.
Matt has to go because
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Matt.
we need to take a picture, actually.
And I can work with Larry to get another one of these. If y'all want it.
Yeah, that would be great. So I would. How you doing? Man?